Hey YouTube, how's it going? This is the next episode in my series where I complete all of my unfinished games. In this video, I'll complete Horizon Zero Dawn. My criteria for completing these games changes depending on the genre and the size of the game. I played Horizon Zero Dawn on normal difficulty and completed the main story and a bunch of side activities while leveling up. I felt that in my playtime here, I was able to experience the core of what the game had to offer, enough that I understood what the game was trying to achieve, what it succeeded in, and where it might have missed the mark. I should also mention that I played Horizon Forbidden West first. I'll be referencing and comparing the games quite a bit, I hope that's okay. Last year, I completed Horizon Forbidden West, and it turned out to be one of my favourite games of all time. I had an absolute blast exploring the Forbidden West, taking down machines and experiencing the story. I was really excited to play Zero Dawn for this video, and get to experience the first game in the series and how it stacked up against the second. I bought Horizon Zero Dawn back in July of 2020. I think I played for around 2 hours and for whatever reason, never picked it up again. I think it was because the start of the game is a bit slow, and I must have been impatient. Funnily enough, I really enjoyed the start of the game this time, as the story and world setup answered some of my questions from Forbidden West. My first impressions of the game were not spectacular, but I expected that, coming from the second game in the series, which I imagined was an improved version of the first. I just said I enjoyed the opening, and while that's true for the story, I found running around as Child Aloy to be a bit off, with the model of Child Aloy feeling a bit weird and the camera being pretty shaky when moving over rocks. Of course, this can all be forgiven, as this section doesn't last long, but it does make me wonder, what if the devs had spent a bit more time polishing this section? Maybe players like me from 2020 would have kept playing. Other major things that caught my eye were the amazing visuals that honestly seem pretty close to Forbidden West. Seeing machines for the first time was still really cool, and how a bunch of things like UI, gameplay animations, and sound are super similar to Forbidden West. While I was having a good time at this point, nothing yet had really surprised me or made me feel like this was a unique experience. I found myself playing this game pretty differently to how I played Forbidden West, using melee a lot of the time and not using stealth nearly as much. I'm sure most of this was due to me setting myself a deadline to finish the game, as I had the first week of university coming up. So doing a full stealth playthrough, which is usually what I like to do, was off the table. However, this is another great thing about this series for me. I get to play games I wouldn't usually, or play familiar games in different ways. I'm really glad I played the way I did here. Machines become more menacing, and the overall difficulty was harder, with close range melee making up a large part of my gameplay. While a player hopping from Zero Dawn to Forbidden West and vice versa will feel right at home, there are still some noticeable differences that differentiated the two. The biggest difference I noticed was that Forbidden West relied on hitting specific machine parts with specific elemental types. Zero Dawn has an understandably much simpler system. You can still overload a machine with an elemental type that it's vulnerable to, but I did find myself missing the newer system from Forbidden West. I found that overall Zero Dawn wasn't balanced as well as Forbidden West in terms of mission structure, which again is totally understandable, and it didn't ruin my time here. I found that a few missions I was able to run through an area, skipping large fights unexpectedly. Another feature I missed from the second game was the climbing. I'm not sure why, but I loved seeing the little yellow crosses indicating handholds. It felt satisfying in a strange way. You could still climb in Zero Dawn, but it just didn't scratch that specific itch for me. It wasn't all just downgrades though. I felt that the skill tree felt more impactful, with less passives and more hard-hitting abilities. I also loved the combat against humans, where Forbidden West featured mostly masked enemies that took 2 headshots to take down. Zero Dawn allows you to hit super satisfying one-shot headshots, and it was definitely one of my favorite activities here. Guerrilla Games crafted characters and a story that perfectly matched the world. The story is super unique, and although I already knew most of the story beats from playing Forbidden West, I still found myself excited to progress the story and engage in battles that I'd only heard about from the second game. Probably my favorite narrative section was when Aloy was being told about Rost's past and everything he went through. It was a pretty emotional section, as you get to finally understand more about him. I think for me it was even better, as I first played the game so long ago, but I always remembered Rost, as he was one of the only characters I'd met. Then playing all the way through Forbidden West, only knowing very little. And now, finally getting to experience his story was pretty special. Overall, like with many things in the game, Forbidden West outmatches it. Again, not to say any of it's bad, but for me, It's really hard not to compare. Dialogue, voice acting, and facial animations are noticeably worse here. Definitely passable, but I did find myself wishing for a little more. Overall, I found the narrative to be really engaging, and I thought that it complemented the gameplay in a way that never took me out of the immersion. The visuals are amazing here. I honestly couldn't notice the difference in visual quality between the two games half the time. Going back to Forbidden West, you can see the difference, but it just goes to show how well made this game was for the time. One thing this game does have over Forbidden West is the dynamic weather system and the color palettes they bring with them. I could be running through a forest and suddenly it would start raining and it would become hard to see too far ahead of me, or a sandstorm would appear while I was riding through the desert. I was so impressed when I first experienced these, and I felt that it really added a whole new level of immersion to the game. When I was first set free into the open world, I instantly felt that it was kind of empty, or that it was more sandboxy. It took me a while to understand what the game was trying to achieve. This was because of my unfair preconceived assumptions of the game. Over my time in the open world, I found that it was so much more immersive, and many things felt more organic, especially the enemy placement, where in Forbidden West, I saw them as set spawns of machines that I could revisit. For whatever reason, I didn't see it this way in Zero Dawn. I'm fairly certain that if I looked into it, I'd find that the enemy placement is actually not any different. But this was my experience, and it really boosted my enjoyment. I started playing this game on hard, but eventually changed to normal. This was for a couple of reasons. First was that the machine seemed to be a lot more aggressive, attacking with the same lunge attack over and over again. I played all of Forbidden West with only the bow, no melee, or other close range weapons, so instantly I knew I had to change my playstyle a bit, incorporate melee more, and I enjoyed my time a lot more that way. The other reason was that the machines didn't have many detachable or vulnerable to certain damage type parts. This meant that on higher difficulties, some of the machines turned into arrow sponges, and it just wasn't that enjoyable. It took me 23 hours to complete Horizon Zero Dawn, mostly focusing on main story, but also doing a fair amount of side quests. In conclusion, I loved my time here. This has definitely turned into one of my favorite gaming series over the past year, and I really can't wait to see what Guerrilla Games comes up with for the next installment. I would definitely recommend this game to anyone who is interested in open world RPGs and immersive worlds, as I think this is among the top games in the genre. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and thank you for sticking around till the end. It took me a while to get around to making this video as I've just started uni and I've had a lot less free time. I don't plan on stopping making these videos anytime soon, however the uploads will definitely be less regular. That being said, I hope some of you stick around for my next video. See ya.